You're about to see a wonderful discussion that I had with Gideon Henner about his language Laut, which is a language that conveys certain things about how autistic people sometimes communicate differently than neurotypical people. Before we get into that, I do want to mention something sort of relevant. This interview was recorded months ago, but given the delays in editing it, it ends up coming a few weeks after an incident that's kind of relevant to a part of it. So near the end of the episode, I talk about my Tourette's diagnosis and the ways that I deal with my tics. And I had no idea that we would be dealing with a major incident at an awards show just a couple weeks before this comes out. So I just want to mention regarding the incident at the BAFTA Awards, I am well aware that there are many people with Tourette syndrome that cannot suppress their tics the way that I do. And as far as that particular incident is concerned, I think that the broadcasters are the ones at fault for what happened. When they were informed that there was someone who has a condition that can cause them to say upsetting things involuntarily, they should not have had a mic near his seat, and they should have been prepared to remove anything that he said. That is all that was required to prevent the incident. But anyway, just want to mention that because I don't want necessarily people to take things that I say and apply them inappropriately to another context. In any case, let's get on with our discussion with Gideon Henner on how he's using conlanging as an educational tool for autism awareness. Welcome to Conlanger, the podcast about constructed languages and the people who create them. I'm George Corley, and with me near Edinburgh is Gideon Henner.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me, George. It's nice to see you because so far you've usually been a disembodied voice in my headphones, not head, I want to say. And yeah, I'm glad to be here.
I have to ask you, if you mostly listen to the audio, does my face match the voice that you've heard?
Yeah, I think it does, but I think maybe I've seen, even subconsciously, a photo of you before, like actually listening to the podcast. I'm not sure if the same was true for William, who looked a bit different than I thought, but yeah.
Yeah. It's just an interesting question because I've had this this moment before when podcast I listened to went to video and I checked it out on YouTube and the person does not look like, it's not like I had a detailed picture of somebody from their voice, you see, but it's like they were, it's like that was not the face that I expected.
Yeah, it's just more like, yeah, your mind maybe seems to exclude some options or, yeah, narrow
Yeah,
it a bit.
yeah. Anyway, so I'm having you on today because you wanted to talk about a project that you did to make make a conlang that captures some things about the autistic experience, which is very interesting to me because like there are so many neurodivergent people in the conlang community. But can you talk a little bit about this project that you've done? I've got the documentation you sent me here, but just a little bit about what your intentions were at the beginning and like how this got started.
Yeah, sure. So the past year, I studied as a mature, or maybe not so mature, student at Durham University, doing an MA in a field called medical humanities, which is a bit difficult to explain. We had some explanations about it, but none of them stuck really. It's mostly where you use humanities. Yeah, so often it's literature or film, etc., to like make points about medicine or investigate medical issues. And in that course, I also had a module, we call it, called neurodiversity and the humanities. And because I'm neurodivergent myself, so I identify as autistic and ADHD, which also means you may sometimes hear or see me stimming while I'm doing this recording by tapping my fingers or something, which I hope is no problem. Because suppressing it would basically be, yeah, not good
Not a problem.
neurodivergent praxis. And because I'm neurodivergent myself and because I'm a conlanger, but also apart from being a conlanger, very interested in linguistics mostly and the intersection of neurodiversity or neurodivergence and languages. I wanted to do something where I use a conlang, and that opportunity came fairly quickly then because one of the first assignments was a so-called student-directed assignment, I think it's called, maybe
Mm.
student-devised, which basically just means, go do something and send us it. With not many parameters, like no research question, and you could all devise that or direct that yourself. Um, and for that, I decided to do, yeah, I always say an autistic conlang, but I think you even described it a bit better. It's more a conlang that wants to make a point a bit about autism or neurodiversity. So it's not necessarily to capture the experiences better, but to make a point about it and to use a conlang as a research method, really. And the goal of that was to challenge specific misconceptions about autism and about autism specifically in connection to language and communication, because there's lots of wrong stereotypes like that autistic people take everything literally and that we don't understand language very well or are pragmatically impaired. And I wanted to challenge these assumptions by way of a conlang. And
Mm-hmm.
I could explain in a bit more detail how that technically looked like, or just what the assignment then comprised. But maybe you want to take a step back first, or would you want to get into it now?
It depends on. I mean, it kind of depends on you. I would say I'm looking at this paper and I'm kind of interested in actually digging into a few things. So at the outset, there's a couple simple things. The language does not use intonation in any way, which is, you know, a struggle that some autistic people have. I'll say, starting out, I know that this is not gonna be meant to cover everyone's experience because it's all different, right? But it that is interesting. Um, and also, you have a little bit of world building here in talking about the society has flat hierarchies, which eases some of the things that like neurotypical people would eases some of the anxieties I think some neurotypical people would have in using this language because like the thing that stands out is there is a grammatical wise way of clarifying your intentions that fits with autistic communication,
Mhm.
but to neurotypical people might sometimes seem like face threatening.
Oh yeah, you're talking about face as in like the politeness registers, I think, or
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
which is something I'm not too familiar with, but
yeah,
which might have been one of the reasons I kind of just like. I think I said I don't use politeness registers in it at all, or rather, they don't use it in the
yeah,
language at all,
yeah,
which is probably a simplification, just like the thing about the intonation and lack of prosody that I have put in there, because I think the main thing to say from a like technical conlanging point of view really is that this is just a sketch really, and not by
yeah,
design but by necessity really. I had
yeah,
to like leave out many things or details and really just have a laser focus on specific features. So
yeah,
yeah, one thing up, yeah, it could maybe also make sense to think about it as in terms of negative space. Like I left out some features completely, and some of them are because like they're just not used to convey meaning. Like intonation or prosody, I think I say in it, is not used to convey any meaning that might be a simplification if I wanted to create a working language, but for a sketch such as this, it's fine. And
yeah.
yeah,
I do want to talk about the intentions though,
oh yeah,
because like you have just it looks like you have like three different ways of like clarifying intentions that are linked to the subjunctive form of the verb. And it's like you're saying something and you want someone else to do something about it, which is like the default. And then you have what is the what are the
there's
other,
I,
and then
yeah, off the top of my head, there's the hortative, which is you want somebody else to do something about it.
right, which is the
And
default.
yeah, that's just the subjunctive stem without
Yeah,
any like prefixes. And the other two are just prefixes. The first one I think is with prefix be, which would be the so-called ego intentive. I think that's the only grammatical term I really made up. And that means that you do something about what you're saying.
right.
So
The speaker
yeah,
does. Yeah,
yeah, you're basically taking charge of the situation. Like when you say something about, yeah, it's cold here, but you use this grammatical form. I call it intention there. Maybe it's a form of mood, really. When the others know that you're about to put the heating on or something like that.
yeah,
And I also proved the mirrorative with those, which isn't really like very um, it's the odd one out, I would say, because it's really just, it also uses the subjunctive stem, but it expresses surprise or strong feeling about something, like narratives do in natural languages. I
right.
think I mostly put the narrative in to have like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of diachronics, even in the very short description of the conlang I was allowed to do, only 4,000 words, because I made the prefix u and said, yeah, that's because we're used to it's a grammaticalization of, ooh, what a surprise. So I wanted to hint at there being like a bit of history behind the language, even though, to be honest, there isn't. Like I
Okay.
simplified everything to the point that diachronics are like they wouldn't make much sense anymore, probably.
Let's talk about those intention, and just to say, like, there's a separate subjunctive stem and also an indicative stem. So you can just say it's cold without any intention behind it.
Yes.
Um, but when we're talking about this, like, what is the problem that that particular feature is solving?
Yeah. I probably have to like take a step back there a bit to explain some like sometimes of maybe of neurodiversity studies because it's both a problem like in communication, but also yeah about a specific stereotype about autistic people. And that stereotype is one we are all familiar with. It's that autistic people are said to take everything literally, or they don't understand metaphorical or figurative language. I think they even ask you questions like that in the diagnostic interview. Don't like the term diagnosis much, but let's go with that now. Um, so, like that, yeah, that failure to understand figurative language really, or that tendency to take everything literally is seen as like an autistic communication deficit. Um, like it's pathologized as autistic people sucking at language or at understanding. I think that's just not true. Um, it's also just like not really what is happening in the situations where autistic people misunderstand things or are in turn misunderstood. I think like that you have, yeah, I try to look at what is really happening there, and I just like thought of a few assumptions or even axioms there. And the first is obviously that language is always ambiguous. Like I think, especially if you consider context as well, in
Right.
the wider discourse, every everything you say can really be ambiguous and have multiple interpretations. And then, like, some people might say that, yeah, that's not really true. It's really not that hard to always get the right meaning. But I think maybe autistic people might be a bit more aware of that ambiguity of language and like showing in more, which might be to do with more like a bit like a focus on details or even, as I think you said in one podcast, the fractal complexity of language, like how everything goes into like, yeah, not little trees, but um, also maybe with little syntax trees that like repeat themselves, where like you can analyze everything and always find multiple interpretations. And I'm a translator by trade, so I'm also very aware of that. Um,
Yeah.
because when you translate something, you always have to consider the multiple interpretations something has to choose the right one. And usually your
Right.
client, if you ask them, like, should I translate this as meaning option A, option B? They say, oh no, you're just supposed to translate what it says. And so I think that's something that happens that maybe neurotypical people are less aware of the ambiguity of language. And autistic people really want to get it right. Like, we fear not being understood correctly and also not understanding others correctly. So we have to choose an interpretation. And we might think of more literal interpretations that other people are maybe not quite aware of. Sorry, that's been a bit of a like deep dive into personal pet theories of mine. But yeah, that is kind of the thing that I want to resolve there actually. Like I want to show people that um, all utterances can have multiple like hidden intentions behind them, which is why I use the term intentions. Um, like when you say something, I've got an example from a book by, I'm just showing it here, Gemma Williams, which is mostly about the communication between neurotypical people and neurodivergent people, mostly autistic people, because that's what most of the research is about. And she's got an example there just to like make it clear, which is also kind of a crash course in pragmatics. Like if you say something like it's getting chilly, you can mean multiple different things where like it can be an exhortation for somebody to do something, or it can be
Right.
background information, etc. And by grammaticalizing that, I really wanted to highlight those multiple interpretations.
That is very interesting, and it's it does highlight sort of a a difference in communication that is not just taking things literally,
Yes,
but recognizing that there's multiple meanings, that there's a question, it seems like for a neurotypical person, that this selection takes less effort, possibly because a neurotypical person is paying attention to less things, or a non-autistic person is doing more work subconsciously to incorporate pragmatic ideas into it or something. But it's hard to. It also becomes like less visible, right?
Yeah,
So it's interesting that like you put that in there to make it more visible, and to say no, you have to actually clarify whether you want somebody to do something about it or you're going to do something yourself, uh, or otherwise you're not speaking the language correctly. And that's kind of where I think that um, I am not. I've never been diagnosed as autistic, but I do sometimes have this situation where I get in disagreements with people around me where I didn't understand the intent behind what they said, and then when I asked for clarification, uh, they like they don't understand why I'm asking for
yeah.
clarification.
And yeah, it could obviously also just be like the linguist disease that like you,
Yeah,
because that's actually also what linguists do, like analyze language in detail. So
yeah.
yeah,
Well, there's probably some overlap. There's
yeah.
probably a reason why the Conlang community has a lot of autistic people.
Oh yeah, I think like it's anecdotal at this point because unfortunately there's been no research in it to
Yeah,
it yet,
yeah,
but that's been my experience. Even for I don't even have that much like experience with the Conlang community at large. Like I've always kind of limited myself to fairly small Discord servers or with CBB, not with ZBB, but with CBB. But if not really done much on there in ages, so I don't have that much, like not that big a sample size really. But even there, like even with some people who might not have might not identify as neurodivergent, you can kind of yeah get a feeling for that, and that it's like yeah we could speculate about why that is, and I think yeah like that tendency to analyze language might obviously predestine you towards going into linguistics, but also trying to be creative about it
yeah,
in terms of
yeah.
conlagging.
It's it is interesting. Um, I've encountered this in the community. I don't know if I have encountered anything quite like yours. It does make me think a little bit about um, there are also a lot of trans and non-binary conlangers,
Yes,
and some of them have done interesting things with gender in language that can be that can have a similar vibe in terms of like breaking expectations.
yeah, and there's also a huge overlap, and that's not anecdotal between the queer and the neurodivergent community, especially
Mm-hmm.
those that do identify as neurodivergent beyond just being diagnosed with it. And
Mm-hmm.
there's even the term neuroqueer, which is in the title of one of the like foundational books about the neurodiversity paradigm and things like that from like yeah a yeah point of view that's critical of like the whole paradigm that's called the pathology paradigm that's currently at work really, and it really kind of merges like gender considerations with neurotype considerations under neuroqueer because it's about breaking expectations, I think, and like yeah, it's a divergence from a norm where the norm is socially constructed, really.
Yeah. And so getting back to the language, so your intention setting, you extended that to affirmative negative responses by just deriving the word for yes from a verb. And then that's another one that gets people. Um, there's there's also, like, in English we only have yes and no, right?
Mhm.
And there are genuinely ambiguous questions where just saying yes or no is not sufficient to be clear on that.
Yeah.
There's other things like that. Um, you also mention you have explicit focus marking,
Mhm.
which kind of exists in English. It exists in a lot of languages, but what problem was that trying to solve for you?
Um, yeah, so that whole thing about the information structure, like the consideration behind that was really twofold. First, I still wanted to again drive home a bit up that um, English can be, or any language can be very ambiguous, and it can sometimes be good. Like it could sometimes be good to have grammaticalized marking of things that are not marked as much in English. I know you said that it can be marked in English, but I, yeah, wanted to make all that more mandatory, really, so that um, not necessarily that there's always less ambiguity or even no ambiguity, because that wouldn't happen, but
Right.
to show that you might need to also translate an English sentence differently. But I think the main thing I was really trying to solve there was you mentioned that as the very first thing, actually, that intonation isn't used, and um, yeah, and in that language, which is called Laut, actually, I always just call it this Conlang, but I'm trying to get used to using its name.
Yeah.
Um, in, you don't have intonation, for example, for marking information structure at all, which you do in English,
Uh-huh.
like to focus or topicalize things, I guess. And so
Mm-hmm.
I thought when you have to solve the problem of how do you mark that then? You could obviously just also leave it ambiguous, but that wouldn't really align very well with having a language that is a bit less ambiguous, at least. Um,
Right. Right.
and so that was one of the things I wanted to resolve, or even just highlight and make visible again, that information structure can, like, or let's say just what is the topic and what is the focus of a sentence, can really affect your interpretation of it. And often we don't really see that it's kind of like invisible, especially in English in writing. Um, I've noticed that I think when I speak, even because my mother tongue German, I think that's a bit more pragmatic. I want to say
Mm.
fuckery, but that's not a good word. Visibly, I don't know. Like shifting around, like a lot of fronting, I think, of topics.
Uh-huh.
That's where you get the infamous me too, because I think it's actually the topic that comes before the verb. And I do that even in English, like I probably front too many things.
Yeah.
Although I think that makes it clearer, um, because that's my innate um, intuition, probably. Um, and yeah, I really wanted to make something like that mandatory, again, like the intentions really mandatory, so that people would have to think about how to structure what we are saying, and like
Yeah.
what are you talking about, like that, even stage setting, really, of what you're talking about and what the context is in the wider discourse, because I think that can also lead to lots of misunderstandings, not only
Uh,
between,
yeah.
yeah.
Of course. And it is interesting to me that you're saying, you've said multiple times, like, language is going to be ambiguous, and you're not trying to eliminate ambiguity entirely, because there are plenty of conlang projects, a lot of sort of edgelang projects that have tried harder to just eliminate ambiguity. But what you seem to be doing, though, is you are taking certain things um, that are frequently needed to be clarified for a lot of autistic people. Not everybody, but it's a common situation, and making them grammaticalized so that hopefully it would make it like more socially acceptable or more regularly disambiguated at the outset.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of like aligns with the goal of using a conlang as a research method, really, to highlight or make explicit things that might be like obscured if we talk mostly about English, or if we don't talk about language at all, like many people do, unfortunately, and see it as just language is clear, language is unambiguous, and if you just speak like standard English, everybody would understand you.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's very interesting to see that. It's sort of it's definitely something I have seen a lot of, like that these are like particular things that a lot of neurodivergent people struggle with. Um, and it does seem to like hit a particular experience. Are the things that you're focusing on here drawn from your personal experience or
Yes,
more from research? Okay, yeah,
both really. Like, I think it's the same as with conducting in general, really. It's usually both, in that you
mm,
do a lot of research, and it's even fun to do the research if you use it like creatively, like in a conlang. So I did read, um, yeah, a lot of research about supposed autistic language deficits, um,
yeah,
like how they are presented now as diagnostic criteria and as deficits that need to be corrected. Um,
right,
in research literature, both like the bad literature that I don't agree with, like how we try to correct things like that, which is usually just horrible, and also the research that's more from a neurodiversity informed point of view, where, and that's why I showed that book earlier, researchers like try to, yeah, make a point of dismantling the really the construction of those features as deficits. Um, like I said, maybe being that maybe autistic people are a bit more aware of the ambiguity of language, which would really be like a feature, not a bug. And the same also, yeah, with others of those deficits. So I did read all that research that shows, yeah, that it can be reframed as positive. Um, but I then chose like features that I like, or that are not only that I like, but that I have had personal experience with. Like, I'm really glad that you mentioned the issue with the word yes earlier, because it's the same in German, even though we have an additional one doch, where you like contradict a negative statement. But
yeah,
I've always run into problems um, where I didn't know what another person meant by yes, and I've been explicitly told, why are you just saying yes? You need to like say more about it. Um, and I thought, and that was before the project even, it would be neat to have a language where instead of saying just yes, it gives you more information. Like, even if it's just
right,
that you will do something about it. Like, if somebody says there's a leak from your flat, that's an example I come to back to too often, also through experience, unfortunately. And you say yes, with the specific intention grammaticalized, and it means yes, I'll do something about it. That would be neat. And
yeah,
so I combined that kind of with those intentions there. Um, and yeah, I think it had other such pragmatic mishaps as well, where I remember, for example, once, I'm not sure if that would even be solved by those intentions, but that's another thing, like, you can never really resolve all these issues. Where sometimes people, like, assume you have, like, more of a hidden intention behind what you're saying. Because I went to a new gym and I didn't want to go in. I just wanted to ask um, whether this here is the entrance so that when I go there, I know where the entrance is. And I asked, is this the entrance to the gym? And was told, you can't go in. You need to be a member. And we kind of couldn't resolve that situation because like I couldn't quite grasp like in the moment afterwards I could what happened, and that was that she thought my question was like not what I wanted to know, but that my question was I want to go into the gym here.
That kind of gets into like what I was talking about earlier, is that like in other languages we have developed these ways of indirectly talking around what we really mean. And I think that is the main thing that autistic people sometimes struggle with, right? Is that it's not the the actual like literal ambiguity in language per se. It's just the conventions around um saying things in a particular way in order to avoid like what I said, like face threat, but like
Mhm.
directly asking for what you want in a way that could put the other person on the spot. And then they have taken those circumlocutions and then made an assumption about what you mean to say. And that the I don't know. So like it's interesting. It's an interesting thought experiment. I don't know if this problem would be solved if people adopted this as a language. I think those things
It
might kind
wouldn't.
of
Yeah,
redevelop, right?
yeah,
But it's a good exploration.
yeah. That's another thing there, and I think I spent a lot of time actually trying to make it clear in the theoretical commentary because I know that my supervisor and correctors um, would be on the track of me wanting to make a superior language because autistic people might be superior, which is not at all what I'm thinking.
Uh,
And yeah, you said that with like it goes round or redevelops, or it's like that treadmill where that's a reason I also didn't go too much into cultural detail. The culture would probably like find new ways of being like talking around the bush, really.
yeah,
And
yeah,
um, yeah, I've also got like another point where why autistic people might really not struggle, but be really like focused so much on getting the right meaning, and that is that if you've often been misunderstood, and vice versa, like you often misunderstand other people and you get criticized for it a lot, you
yeah,
develop a kind of trauma, and that could also be a trauma response, but
yeah,
like that would require another thing, which is a thing that's talked about in neurodiversity studies, which is that like if you're neurodivergent, other people can usually tell. And they can tell within like 10 seconds without
right,
knowing like consciously, like subconsciously. Like there seems to be a kind of radar, especially among neurotypical people actually, like where they can make a so-called rapid thin slice judgment about other people, and they don't realize that you're neurodivergent, but they like may form an instant negative opinion, so that if you misunderstand something, or the other way around, or choose the wrong interpretation of something, they might be more biased to think, yeah, that's something that's wrong with you.
right. It's not necessarily that they like know that your brain structure is different. It's
Mhm.
just that by observing whatever mannerisms or
Yeah.
anything subconsciously, they recognize you as different, you as an other, and that will
Yes.
make them hypercritical of you, which
Yeah.
is yeah, that's another problem with it, because then you ask these clarifying questions that you need to, and they take it as there's something wrong with you, and
Yes.
become more hostile.
Yeah. Or like it can also go the other way around. Like if you've had that experience, often that like you're not supposed to ask stupid questions. I think that's even a saying, like ask stupid
Yeah.
questions, get stupid answers, or something like that. That's probably not
Yeah.
it, but like something along those lines. When you're like less likely to ask questions for clarification, and that can also be construed as like being uncommunicative if you then do it wrong.
Right. Yeah. 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 I totally get that. And I totally get how like presenting some features of a language like this can be like something to highlight that for people is that like, okay, these specific things in other languages are sometimes difficult to tell apart, and we need to actually know what is the intent behind what you're saying. What is
Yes.
that? Yeah. And maybe this can be a tool to teach people about autistic experiences and teach them like you need to be okay with people asking clarifications on your intent
Oh
and
yeah.
things like that.
I think yeah, that's really like the only thing I could probably hope for that like doing a conlang in a highly niche like context would achieve. Like it could be used like as a teaching moment, as people like to say.
Yeah.
Or like there's also like something I've not really got into yet, but and it's really only like a side note. Some people like to compare cross neurotype communication, like between neurotypical and neurodivergent people, to intercultural communication, um, where even if you speak the same language on the surface level, like international English in most academic contexts these days or business contexts, um, there are maybe like different I don't know, underlying assumptions people have about how things
Yeah.
work, which could be cultural um, in the case of intercultural communication, but also in the case of cross neurotype communication. Also, I would probably stop a bit shy of calling autism a culture because, yeah, it's some people like 100% make that statement, but I think like there's just too many other like yeah aspects involved.
I would agree with you. So I would say calling autism, talking about autistic culture, you need to keep in mind that autistic people exist everywhere and are affected by the cultures around them,
Yes,
and don't always have contact with each other. So there it can't be an overarching autistic culture. There can be similarities in how autistic people behave and cope with things, but there's going to be also peculiarities with how they deal with local cultures, right?
yes, yeah, because the issue with that assumption or thought is that like it ignores other intersections like with the local culture, which is the same
Yeah.
case for Ladan, and has been like a point in like critiquing Ladan, and not only by
Yeah.
myself but people before me too. That's like yeah, women like I'm assuming most listeners will be familiar with Ladan and its premise,
Yes.
which is
Yes.
that it's a language made for women that better reflects their experiences. That like women are 50% or 51 or 52% of the world's population, and like it's really not like what they have in common is biologically determined as much, but a lot of it will be cultural as well. So yeah, it's like
Yeah.
they might have more in common sometimes with men from the same culture if they are from the same class or social standing.
Yeah. I can't say too. We can't say too much about Ladan because we're both men here. But I remember we covered Ladan a long time ago when we had Bianca on the show, and her reaction to Ladan, I think, was that it's like kind of socially awkward because it has so many like much more like granularity in like disambiguating things like this. It has so many evidentials. It has so many like different like things to like get at like little particular meanings. And also like not all of those experiences would apply to all women, right?
Yeah,
So
I've had the same issue really with like not knowing how much I should talk about Zardan in my dissertation, which
yeah.
was in part about native tongue and Zardan. And I think I put a caveat in somewhere, which I hope I haven't deleted, that yeah, it's also a bit questionable to talk so much about how to do feminism right as a man. But yeah, that's
But
where we
yeah.
are after I chose the topic.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's still fair to like try to do some criticism. Like it is true that Ladan kind of assumes that women will approach social hierarchies and social situations in a certain way that might not be universal, but
Yes.
I don't have the lived experience to
Yeah,
fully dive into that.
me neither. And in all fairness to Suzette Hayden Elgin, first of all, I think it's still a great book, Native Tongue, and the idea
Yeah.
is great. And also, she walked back on a lot of the problematic issues, I think, later. Although
Mm-hmm.
it was a bit of a like, yeah, I've always actually meant this. Like, I think she did say that she only meant it to be like a language for women of a specific social background, because she
Okay.
couldn't write it differently because that's her background. So, yeah, I'm trying to give her that. And there's
Yeah.
also a connection to neurodivergence in that people have also made the argument that, like, even though neurodivergence, many of them, especially ones that we are talking about mostly here, like autism and ADHD, Tourette's, OCD probably, I'm not quite sure, but are innate. Actually, OCD might be a reaction to specific things or circumstances, but like the innate ones are like, yeah, they are a reality and not socially constructed. But like a lot of the things that neurodivergent people struggle with are like in the context of socially constructed norms. So
Yeah.
yeah, um, it very much depends on where you live as well, or even what
Yeah.
language you speak.
I mean, talking about my own neurodivergence um, experience, like the one thing I am diagnosed with is Tourette's syndrome.
Mhm,
And because of our cultural, the most visible Tourette's people, the most visible people with Tourette's that you see in the world, and our cultural ideas of what that looks like, you can be looking at me on this podcast and like, how does he have Tourette's syndrome? And well, the reason is now I do not have any linguistic tics.
mhm.
I do have motor tics and I make like grunts, but I have learned to suppress them publicly, and I don't express them on the podcast specifically because, and this is I don't know if you get this with like stimming with autism or anything like that, but when I express tics, people get overly concerned,
Mhm.
and it is very difficult to reassure people, no, this is okay. I'm okay. I'm not like having a seizure or anything. This is just something that my brain does.
Yeah,
And it's hard to even talk about it because like as I'm talking about it, I'm feeling tics rise up, but I don't want to express them because I don't want to cause concern in other people.
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's very relatable to almost all forms of neurodivergent, really. Especially with the stimming is, I guess, a good comparison because I've been very much taught to suppress any stimming. I'm actually trying to relearn doing it more again publicly,
Mhm. I'm
but it's
I'm
still
sitting here
ingrained.
rubbing my hands because like doing some stimming actually helps me avoid doing tics.
Yeah, yeah. I've also got like redirected stims. Some of them
Yeah.
because they're more socially acceptable, some of them because one of my stims would be rubbing my eyes. And
Hmm.
actually, I think that's not too healthy for your eyes. So
No.
I'm trying not to do that.
Yeah.
And actually, probably my first exposure to what wasn't a Conlang, but maybe a Conlang word, was in the context of stimming because my parents um, kept telling me not to stim, but we didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Because we thought it was just like, yes, some behavior, like some childish behavior. So not their fault, really. But we also didn't know what it was called because there was like no autism awareness yet at all in Germany at the time. So I
Yeah.
think my sister made up a word for it, Grötzeln, which in German, so it has a German word in the end, uh, does sound like something nasty. And I think that was like the sound symbolism is kind of nasty, at least, um, to my German ears. And they used that word for stimming because like, there wasn't a word for it really that they knew. I wouldn't even know if there's a word in German now, but yeah.
Yeah. But that's a thing. We both kind of learn to suppress parts of ourselves
Yes.
and also like redirect them in other ways in order to make other people comfortable or make other people less concerned, because people don't people aren't really aware of like the normality of it. Like it's the like the thing is, like when I suppress a tick, I'm more tense
Yeah.
and it's more uncomfortable for me. Uh, and one thing about Tourette's is as you get older, it does get less of a problem. And I don't talk about it very often because talking about it can cause the compulsion to rise.
Okay, I
So
didn't know that. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, there's sort of a like a psychological component to it. But like I, you know, it's 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 something that I'm used to doing, and you know, I don't know if it's necessarily healthy to always be suppressing it. But
I don't
I
think it
have
is,
I have
probably. Yeah.
yeah, but I have reasons why I do it,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of it is just the way other people react.
Yeah. Like there's the term masking or camouflaging for it in context of
Yeah,
all neurodivergence, really, where you try to fit in more with neuronormative society, as we
yeah,
call it,
yeah,
um, which is similar to passing, maybe as a concept. Actually, no, that's a bit different. Yeah.
yeah. Sort of.
Yeah. It's
It's
maybe a bit of a form of passing as neurotypical, but also not because you're like, even if you have no problem, like telling people you're neurodivergent, you might still suppress specific tics or behaviors. So it's not
yeah,
really only wanting to pass, but make others more comfortable, I guess.
and I mean sometimes there are actual reasons. Like you said,
Yes.
you probably don't want to stim by rubbing your eyes. You probably want to train yourself not to do that because it's
Yeah.
not good. There, I have seen, I have heard of people with Tourette's who actually have tics that are dangerous that
Oh,
can
yeah.
harm them. That's not me. It won't hurt me, but you know that's something to be aware of for their experience. For me, it's just like I have never had something that hurt myself, and I've always been in control enough that I can avoid hurting other people, right?
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah, there's also an issue regarding intersections again that generally, we want to, of course, like unmask more and more be our natural selves. But sometimes, especially for marginalized people, that can be very dangerous.
yeah,
Like people of color, if they express tics or have an autistic meltdown, and police in most countries. isn't good with it, to say the least.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
yeah,
I've had um a negative interaction with police just for having like an anger issue with a parking meter once. But like if
oh
I were
well,
black, it
yeah,
would be a bigger problem.
yeah,
And if I can imagine like a black person that has Tourette's and has tics in public, um, probably is in more danger. I mean, I know that like autistic black people are in more danger than white autistic people because I have seen like stories of that being true.
yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely happens, and it also happens in the UK and probably in Germany. I didn't know yet I was autistic while I lived in Germany, but I lived in Bavaria, one of the like most conservative and strictest state, and I would get like stop searched like twice a week for some time for drugs
Yeah.
because I also look like a stoner. But I think like the
Yeah.
neurodivergent, I kind of also was a stoner, which like exacerbated the issue. But like the neurodivergence definitely played a part because I was always told like stop acting weird like by the police people or like yeah this one is weird we should take him down or
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I personally have had times when like I was driving and I felt the compulsion for a ticket and I like suppressed it because I'm like, what if cops see me acting strangely in the car?
Oh yeah.
But and even though I'm a demographic that's not in as much danger from the police, it was a concern for me.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, I don't drive, luckily, but it's always an issue. Also, like, yeah, because you need to be fully focused, and I'm also ADHD, so that could be an issue.
Yeah.
Also, if the cops only like suspected that.
Yeah. The but anyway, we've gone far afield, but I mean, I think this is all kind of relevant
It is,
to
yeah.
your point. Is like what you're doing with Laut is trying to like build more awareness of these particular features of autism that you experience and other people experience, and it is very interesting to see this project and see your focus on that, and like your explicit saying like this is not meant to be an improvement on language, this is just like a thought experiment. Whereas like I don't know how serious like Suzette Hayden Elgin was about the experiment portion
Mhm.
of Ladon. I feel like it was partly just this is a thought experiment of like what if there was a language that women could communicate better in, and like I think she like after 10 years she sort of said, well, the experiment failed because women didn't
Yeah.
pick it up. Like I don't know if you were trying that hard on it, but but the the idea of using a constructed language to like highlight these things is really interesting. Before we go, I do want to know like, do you have other conlanging interests? Like, do you dabble in like more eng-langy things or in naturalistic conlangs that are like not not this kind of like advocacy focused thing?
Yeah. So I started conjuring in my head fairly early, but didn't get into it in earnest till quite late, actually, like 7 or 8 years ago, because for a long time I thought it was only a weird thing I did in my head. And I even mentioned it during my autism interview with a neurologist. Yeah, I also make up these intricate words in my head with languages and geography and football leagues and everything. And yeah, they nodded and took it down. But yeah, so 7 or 8 years only I get started really in earnest conjuring and engaging a bit with the community. And I've always since then really done mostly like semi-naturalistic a priori ranks. So
Mm-hmm.
not done an a posteriori yet, although I've wanted to do like a descendant of Gothic spoken in the Balkans for some time. Um,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, mostly we in these languages, the a priori ones, I just try to really be um, you might even see a bit of that in this language, or you would if I developed it further. Like I try to see, like if I start with one idea, like one specific phonological idea, um, like I'm like where it goes. Like I like having strange consonant series, which I call like the Korean like series, where you can't quite tell what's going on because the allophony like makes it look like yeah, there's overlap. Um,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
apart
that's
from
cute.
that,
That's great.
yeah, I do like, yeah, I think playing with morphophonology, morphophonology, I don't know how to say that, but, and
Yeah.
morphosyntax a lot, like with various ergative, split ergative alignments, really, and diachronics. And so actually what I'm trying to do now, um, apart from hopefully like developing this advocacy-based language, as you said, a bit further, I that might not work really in an academic context. So I hope I'll be proven wrong and somebody will fund me a PhD for it, or at least publish it as a paper. Um, so I've already thought about how I could include what I did with that language in my other converting and conlanging that's going on at the moment, which is just like a bog standard secondary fantasy world,
Yeah.
except that people can fly like humans without wings, but like not all cultures knew that from the beginning. Also, we've learned that now. But yeah, that's only the converting part. For the languages, I did more of an a priori one intended to look like a bit like Gaelic with a similar spelling, but the orthographical rules are completely different. They just end up looking the same. And I'm trying to include Laut in that quite a bit because I thought they have one initial mutation, which is based on their labial sound. I think it was, yeah, it was the labial nasal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when it changes, like the initial sound, the onset, sometimes it voices it, but sometimes it labializes the following consonant or rounds the vowel. And I thought that might be needed just to form the subjunctive stems in that other language, Laut, which we were talking about all the time. And
Yeah.
it could also fit in well diachronically because that labialization comes from a definite article, actually, that was like M or something like that. It's not really clear.
Uh-huh.
So which was also used as a relativizer. Sorry, I'm going on about that a bit, but um, yeah, and so it became a subordinate marker and later subjunctive marker, but could maybe also be used on nouns still as an optional focus marker.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I also do other conlanging that probably won't go anywhere really, but it's just fun to do.
Well, I mean, this is all a hobby anyway.
Oh
There's
yeah.
this is not something you go into for the money.
Yeah, or
There,
even the academic credits, because it's really difficult to make academics
yeah.
care about conlanging.
I do hope that that's changing. You
I
know,
think,
we've
yeah,
had a textbook published that
yeah,
is
I
a
bought that at
conlang textbook.
Copycon. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So and there have been conlang courses before. Most of them have been like geared toward being linguistics courses disguised with that are taught through conlangs. But I think it's getting more to the point of people like wanting to learn this craft and wanting to develop this craft, and that's exciting. But yeah, it's still a little bit difficult. When I was doing my PhD, I kind of had some conlang centric ideas. Like I was thinking, oh, what if I go and do field work on Esperanto speakers or something? But I
Mhm.
never really pursued that because I didn't know how professors would react, right? Um, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I was
um,
really lucky there because my supervisor was really enthusiastic about me using a conlang because she said like that's not really happened before in that field. So,
Yeah.
which maybe would be an argument against it for some like teachers,
Yeah.
but also it shouldn't be. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. You do a really good job of writing something up that people who are not linguists will understand, because you're not in a linguistics department. You have to like pull back on that part a little bit.
Yeah. It was like kind of the opposite to talking on the podcast here, where people are like familiar with the conjugating stuff, but maybe not all the neurodiversity concepts. And where it was really
Yeah.
the other way around. And I even think I explained what nouns and verbs are.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, that it's been really great talking to you. And
Thank you very much.
and
That went by fast.
I really do enjoy your thing. And can I put a link to this paper up, or do you think you're gonna like develop something for Fiat Lingua or something with it, or?
So I've already sent it to Fiat Lingua as is, but not heard back yet. So I'm still
Okay.
waiting if it will be put up there, and I might develop it into something still. But I don't have a website just yet that's on my unfortunately very long to-do list. So I
Yeah.
hope I you can link a website once the podcast goes out. I don't know how long you take to edit.
Yeah. Well, even if it's not up, then you send me an email and I'll make sure to put that up. But I think
Yeah.
we need to wrap up.
Oh
Where
yeah.
can people find you online? So you're working on a website. I can link to that once that exists, right?
Yeah. So at the moment I only have a link tree, which is just a page with multiple links, and
Okay.
one of those links is to my Blue Sky account, on which I am slightly active, as in I read it sometimes, and
Yeah.
hopefully post more about conjugating, hopefully. So that's probably your best bet. Also, I'm actually also happy to be emailed, especially with funding offers, which isn't likely to going to happen. And I think I might have my email on the link tree as well, or not. And we'll have to check that. But I'll definitely give you the link tree so you can link it somewhere. I don't know by heart where, like, what the link is. But yeah, that I will also update that so that it would link to any website I have or any additional accounts, like, um, yeah, on like conjugating sites. I've also
Yeah.
recently joined the Language Creation Society, so I also have hosting for my website. Not that I want
Yeah.
to advertise anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all great. Thank you so much, Gideon, for being on. Do you have any
No, thank you
final
for your time.
words? Yeah. Do you have any final words of wisdom before we go?
Um, yeah, also, I'm not sure how wise they are. Actually, I think I've got something wise to say, but it might not make that much sense. It sounds wise. Like, I think that neurodiversity is also the diversity of languages or of different communication styles and language use. And diversity is generally a positive thing, which is why we use the term neurodiversity, like in analogy with cultural diversity or biodiversity.
Yeah.
So I hope that sounds good to wrap up. And it's been a pleasure
Well,
being on
no,
here.
yeah, I get what you're saying about that, but yeah, that is very very important to think about. And thank you so much for being on, and thank all of you out there for listening, and happy conlang. Thank you for listening to or watching Conlangery. I produce this podcast once a month for all podcasting platforms and as a video version on YouTube. On the YouTube channel, you can also find my weekly Tongues and Runes live streams where I am creating languages for Dungeons and Dragons players, and occasionally some solo Conlang tip videos. Planning on doing more of those. If you'd like to support what I'm doing, I have a Patreon where you can get early episodes, exclusive polls, and notes for Tongues and Rune streams. You can also, for only $1 a month, get your name at the end of each video. just like the fine people here. Since this podcast goes out on audio as well, let me read the names out. Minerva, Connor Stewart Rowe, Kenan Kigunda, Nye, Tabby, Soten, Viren Patrick, Sylvia Sotomayor, Kay, Alex Russell Hayes, Jesse, Alexis Hugelman, Tinguish, R. Table, Paul Roser, Miles Ronkovich, Jake Penny, Artifexian, Nicholas Norblad, Eloivar Yana Mentaleum, Sigourney Hunter, Daniel Quigley, Rekka Grunk, Grammar Antifa. Our theme music is by Null Device. Conlangery is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 4.0 International License.